Alright everyone, the saga of the East Palestine derailment continues. Yes, indeed. It was far worse than originally anticipated. Link in the description, archived of course. Turns out the plume of chemicals from when they burned the vinyl chloride, or I think it was vinyl chloride, off in those tankers, they drifted over 13 different states, causing much higher concentrations than normal of the reagents that were being besprinkled across the atmosphere. Now, originally, we were told this is a localized thing. It's not a big deal. We've immolated most of the chemicals here. Don't worry about it too much. If you downwind, it's not going to be a big problem. We're talking about low concentrations. It's not going to cause any lasting problems or anything like that. Well, here we are, long after the event, and you're still finding massively excessive amounts of these chemicals in the soil across 13 different states, mainly down in like Kentucky and places like that, but some of it drifted back north and made it all the way to New England. Yes, these chemicals are in Vermont soil too. Thank you, Joe Biden. That's really cool. Now, for an administration that supposedly cares so much about worker safety and ecology and environmentalism, it's very interesting what the response was. Pretty muted. Effectively, it was blame Orange Man for vague deregulation of the rail industry that wouldn't have even impacted the fact that this particular event happened. Then Trump shows up to East Palestine, gets a very warm reception, actually does something topical to help, which is hand out bottled water that isn't contaminated and cleaning supplies and shit like that, so people can scrub some of the chemicals out of their home post-haste. Buttigieg shows up a few days later, originally probably not having planned to go at all, and Biden shows up much more recently, over a year after it happens. He waits until the chemicals locally are just in the soil and there's no more risk to him. This caused respiratory effects beyond Ohio. The East Palestine rail disaster was a regional disaster. Originally, though, it was billed as being a minor local disaster. Hey, don't worry. It looks worse than it really is. It's not our fault, so, the Orange Man bad. That was the only response of the administration. They were very flippant about it. They didn't really take it seriously. They acted as though people were conspiracy theorists for sharing videos online of, oil slicks and piles of dead fish and frogs and shit in and around that general area. What I recommended at the time was that anyone in or around that area or downwind should immediately get their soil tested, so that you have a baseline, so that if you file some sort of complaint, if you end up with cancer or something like that, down the road you can say, look, I got cancer. I had my soil tested when this first happened, before the next rains came, and this was not in the soil. Now this cancer-causing chemical is at 50 times background levels in my soil. Put two and two together, I'm suing the rail company. And you'll be successful if you did that. You won't be successful if you didn't, because you can't prove that the chemicals weren't always at elevated levels in your soil. You can infer that. A reasonable person understands that. But in a court of law, it's going to be harder for you to argue. You might get a settlement if you're lucky, but unless it's part of a massive class action, going to be a little bit more difficult. Link in the description, archived of course. You can read up on it for yourself. This disaster was a substantial disaster. Some of us at the time pointed out that it was going to be far worse than they were going to let on. It was obviously part of a cover-up. They realized the situation was untenable. You have a shit ton of these chemicals leaking all over the place. They didn't really have a choice but to immolate it. But they should have warned the public about the dangers that were involved in having that process done. They should have warned the public. The EPA was caught slipping. The transportation agencies were caught slipping. The company was caught slipping. And then the Biden administration, when it had the opportunity to actually capitalize upon that. So let's go just straight into politics. We're not talking about ethics or anything like that. The Biden admin had the ability to immediately go in, pledge full support, and say, don't worry, we're going to take care of this. Buttigieg should have been there within a week. They could have preempted Trump, and then if he did show up at all, it would look bad for him, because it would look like, Trump's only going because, Buttigieg showed up or something. Biden should have showed up, and they didn't do that. They completely fumbled on a major ecological disaster, pissing off, by the way, some environmentalists in the process. I know if I was a non-NIMBYist environmentalist, and I am, I'd be a little bit pissed about the fact that those chemicals made it literally to my state. Yeah, Rutland has some extra, there's a little something extra in my garden this year, I suppose. Now, again, thanks, Joe. What if it was a radioactive plume? Then I could finally live out my dream of having glow-in-the-dark leaks. That would be pretty fun, I suppose. But unfortunately, that's not reality world. The reality that we live in is the Biden administration massively dropped the ball. This disaster was an order of magnitude bigger than they let on. And they're only just now sort of admitting it. they're only now admitting, oh, actually, yeah, sorry about that. We're sorry that we sprinkled all the corn in Kentucky with chemicals. That's about all. Peace out.